Connected Consumer.
Hi, I'm Rosey Sera.
Hi, I'm Chris White.
We're the hosts of Parks Associates podcast, The Connected Consumer. Today, we are joined by Parks Associates President and CMO Elizabeth Parks and Jennifer Kent, who is our VP of Research. Thank you guys for joining us today.
So for those of you who have, sorry, you're right. You say hi. Hi, everyone, too. Hi. I was going to give them the spiel about what the podcast is.
I'm ready to
We got too excited because we have some colleagues. Okay, so here's what the podcast is, new listeners. We bring on industry experts and our own experts from internally at Parks Associates to talk about all things connected devices. We talk about connected entertainment, connected health, energy, smart home. And today we're talking about residential security because our colleagues here who are joining us, Elizabeth and Jennifer, went to ESX. Elizabeth, can you start by telling us what this conference is and give us a little overview on the background and your background with it?
Yeah, thanks for inviting us to join in and talk about what happened last week at the Electronic Security Association show, ESX. ESA is a membership-based organization that was started in 1948. And so they have their annual show, which is really highlighting some of the best practices going on in all security, both residential and commercial. So we had this great invitation to host a couple sessions in partnership with them and talked about the role of security in the SMB market and also the multifamily space. So thank you for inviting us. And I know Jennifer has got some key takeaways on the SMB space, but also just the blurred lines between the smart home devices and home security systems is creating all sorts of new opportunities.
Amazing. Jen, please feel free to tell us a little bit more about your experience. We hosted not just one, but two sessions. So I'm excited to hear more about what you guys covered.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everybody. Hello to the listeners. Love being part of these Connected Consumer podcasts. So thanks, Chris and Rosey, for inviting us on. Continue to love going to in-person conferences again. So great to see the people who are doing the work, coming up with new ideas, reaching new consumers and new end users in the spaces that we cover. So as Elizabeth mentioned, we had two sessions. So I led the first session with a real powerhouse group of speakers really talking about the SMB market. And then Elizabeth led a conversation talking about the opportunities in multifamily and the top 5 key factors for success. So love to dive in a little bit about, what those conversations were about, what we really heard from the speakers. And what was nice is it was a pretty intimate group and there was a lot of participation from the audience. And so, a lot of the audience tend to be at the ESX show, dealers themselves, security businesses, oftentimes small and medium businesses themselves. So that was really interesting during the SMB panel to be talking about where small, medium businesses are today and what their needs are. And then you have a lot of these family, long-time local businesses who are trying to figure it out themselves. And so a lot of interaction and good questions from the audience. So let's go ahead and start there. So first of all, why are we talking about small, medium businesses at all, right? They're kind of what I call a squishy middle group that sometimes get overlooked, right? There's a lot of focus on residential, of course, and then commercial. And the SMB group fits somewhere in the middle, usually 50 or fewer, depending on your organization. You might determine it as 100 or fewer employees. You may have multiple different locations that you're trying to manage. You may be being run out of an office building or a retail setting. It's very kind of diverse and fragmented market and hard to define. But it's been one of the groups that has been hardest hit during the pandemic. And in our own survey research, we found that, SMBs are really first just trying to exist, right? Trying to make it through the pandemic. And at the same time, adapting to new pressures on their business, to adapt to consumers that maybe aren't coming into meet them where they are into their space, and they have to deliver services and products to consumers in a new way. Employees who are working remotely and now in maybe a hybrid situation, right? New office layouts that they had to adjust due to occupation limits or health concerns. and did their, networking infrastructure and the way they're thinking about securing a space also shift with these layout shifts. So SMBs actually, even though that they've told us in our research that they, were just trying to make it through the pandemic, they actually were still spending and even spending more on technology that could, shore up the networking, landscape in the business, and then also securing those spaces and securing things for their employees and their customers. So we heard from the panel that, they have all essentially seen growth in this segment. They think it's an attractive segment. The segment needs a lot of support and a lot of services. We also heard that, yes, some of the businesses have actually, and the work has been shifting into the home, and that actually shifts some of the business from SMB to a residential segment. And there's still these dealers are still serving their customers, but the location's changing a little bit, which is really interesting. One thing I really wanted to call out that was, an absolute hot topic of conversation where the audience jumped in and was kind of really in dialogue with our panelists was around the need for data security and cybersecurity in small businesses. So, more small businesses than ever are not just taking basic security services, but interactive security services and connected devices like cameras and thermostats and door locks for sure, access control, and trying to weave this all together into a smarter, secured space that they can control for their business. But there's really concern about, the security of those devices, and then also the security of the network as employees shift to remote workers. And so what was wonderful is we had Preeti Agarwal, who's the Senior Cybersecurity Solutions Architect at Plume, who was there to talk about, the solutions that are now on market, not just directly to small, medium businesses, but to dealers who can partner with a company like Plume and offer as a new business line cybersecurity and networking services to SMBs, right? A lot of times they don't know where to look, and they may not even think of their security dealer first as somebody who can help them with IT needs. But really, there's a huge opportunity there. We heard from Bates Security, Jeremy Bates, the president of Bates Security, who is talking about how they've actually partnered with a local IT managed services company to also offer this as part of their business. Nice. A really nice way to round out a new area of business that's hitting a very, very high need for small, medium businesses.
Yeah, that seems really attractive to me. And Elizabeth, you're a business owner, so you tell me if I'm wrong about this, but it seems like being able to add new services without adding new vendors is helpful to everyone, kind of in terms of having someone that you trust, but also just the logistics operations of it, moving invoices around. And for bigger companies, having qualified vendors is always a barrier here. And, looking at some of the data around this too. So we see in our research that among the security system SMB owners, 45% are being professionally monitored. That seems like a lot of runway to me. So it seems like while they're out there trying to add ProMon, while they're trying to get more security devices on walls and things like that, also being able to kind of upsell, but also differentiate themselves by having the cybersecurity option is kind of a good move there.
Yeah, Chris, absolutely. I would agree with that assessment in the sense that having one bill or less bills or less vendors, less companies to deal with in a small business is important. And the role of IT in really protecting your network and all your data. I mean, we heard a story on that panel about a partner of Jeremy's, I think, or somebody's up there, where they had a ransomware experience where they had to pay $500,000 to unlock their servers. Wow. And that's their entire business is, based upon that working. So, I mean, as a small business owner, certainly we pay quite a bit, I think, for our IT services and require that given the remote work that we do and the type of research data we have. I actually have a meeting coming up to talk about more cybersecurity and protection on our network, because I I'm pretty concerned. And that requires that we add in additional software, and we have to pay for that. But I also think it's like insurance, you really need these things in place. And actually, because of the contracts that we have with certain companies, we have requirements that we have to have cybersecurity policies within our corporate insurance suite of many insurances that we have. And so that actually is about an 85-page document that takes a lot of IT prowess to even understand what they're talking about and what needs to be done. So you have to have experts, and then it's a necessity now. And then there's add-ons. So certainly a lot of additional revenue that can be there, and that can also be applied back to the residential market. If you think of all the connected devices, the average household having 16 devices now, there's a lot that needs to be protected. So I think that's an area of growth we're going to continue to see. It's still at the very early stages.
Yep. And our friends at Plume, I'm sure, would remind us that the best way to do it is at network edge, right? So the way to kind of put a lasso around all the devices that we have in the home. So Jen, before we move off SMB, was there anything that came up that was talk about kind of on-premise, I guess more traditional security outside of cybersecurity, new innovations, new trends, any news on just regular cameras and sensor type stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely a big focus on, on video, right? That video cameras, less doorbells in the sense that we think of in residential, but that video being incorporated basically as standard almost into security systems. And for SMBs in particular, talking about how it actually extends the perimeter. So your first line of your perimeter is no longer intrusion, right? Your first line should be where your video can see. And so you should be able, with video analytics and services, to be able to, see and detect a potential issue first before anyone ever even makes it to the door or the gate or the access point, right? And so you're extending the perimeter with video, and the ability for video analytics to, be able to trace an event as it's happening was really interesting. So, if an event is happening and you have to go back and look through video feeds to figure out what was the timeline of this, and a lot of times that happens very much after the fact today, and it's a very manual process. But with AI and real-time live feeds, you can detect, very quickly and be able to tell to law enforcement officers an event's happening, the person started here, entered here, and is now here. And so we heard a lot about the ability for video analytics, again, not only to move that perimeter out, but to serve better during actual events. So heard a lot on that from Paul Williams, who's the Chief Product Officer at NICE North America. We also had Alex Bertelli, who's the CEO of Havenlock, on the panel. And they have some solutions that actually help detect and then lock down buildings in their suite. And then also, James Reno, who's the Vice President of Sales with Commercial Business for Alarm.com. And Alarm.com, James certainly, agreed that the video is where it's at, and there's so much more that's happening in video analytics, and a lot of the innovation is there.
Yeah, it's really neat the ability for computer vision to recognize the difference between a pedestrian and someone who's kind of intending to break in based on body language and stuff. There's a really interesting history to that I had to really dig into for our report that I want to plug, and I can't remember what it's called. Context is king.
Context is king.
Context is king.
If I recall, it was based on hospitals. They were using hospitals and mental hospitals. They were using cameras to kind of detect aggressive postures and things like that, so they could get orderlies to come and help. And so building on some of that, they were able to start applying the difference of, someone kind of creeping up to the house to break in versus somebody who's rolling up to deliver a birthday present or drop off a package or whatever. So that's really cool stuff. All right, Elizabeth, your turn. You got to run my panel. I was very sorry I couldn't go because I was too sick last week to go. I'm feeling a lot better now. Thank you. But I didn't get to go and be there and talk multifamily with kind of an all-star panel. Could you talk a little bit about what was going on the MDU panel? Anything interesting that you thought from the research we put together in advance, and what the crowd had to say too?
Yeah, so I'm sorry you were sick also, because it was a great session, but I was happy to be able to fill in for you. I think the main points that came out of the discussion were all around education and the need to really educate building owners and property managers on not just the technology, but the benefits, and then what the applications are ultimately in the experience. So there was a lot of pushing of the experience. And I think Miriam from Brevo really hit that one home. That when she's talking to people, it's less specific on the technology and more about what it can do for you. So certainly our data supports the open runway for opportunity to add technology into buildings, really all buildings, but also the multifamily space in particular here. So I think our research shows that about 10% of consumers in an apartment reference there are some smart home devices within the environment, which just shows this big opportunity to add connectivity and the devices along with it. Usually there's a platform too to enable it all to work for the resident as well as the property or building owner, property manager. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot there to talk about, and ask me something else specific about the panel. Maybe Rosey can jump in on what apartment tech she has in her space.
Yeah, so I don't have the most high-end, high-rise, multi-dwelling living experience, but yeah, we have sensors in our doors to be able to enter our apartments. It's really all about like fobs and everything like that. But it's definitely getting there when it comes to energy management and probably integrating some solar panels and stuff like that. So I think it's a matter of just seeing how residential tech can kind of integrate into the multi-dwelling unit world. So I'm excited to see the future and what happens.
Well,
Rosie's
Jennifer,
representing our unmet demand, right, Elizabeth? Where she would love them to put a smart thermostat on her wall and
Yes.
right, and continue to improve the access control and stuff like that.
well, yeah, and I was going to say that Jennifer Doctor with JCI, and there was another person on the session who had just moved into apartment spaces from single family homes and really emphasized how, there's really no technology that's going on in that's something that they're all working on. So I think there was a discussion also around Matter and interoperability that, of course,
Right.
came up, and that's a very passionate conversation when it comes up on stage, because everybody is all for the initiative in the sense of bringing all these various products together in a unified whole home solution that works, and it's easy and simple and plug and play. And then there's a reality of how can that happen. And so
Yeah.
that was a great conversation. I felt like that took place about Matter, and that things take time and there's
Yeah.
obstacles, and also emphasizing privacy and security, the role there. So I don't know, Jen, did you hear anything from that session that was like a total standout, maybe around integration and interoperability?
Yeah, well, so I definitely had the luxury of I was done my panel, so I just got to relax and listen to Elizabeth and her speakers go. And I was actually going to say the thing that stood out to me strongest was the way in which all of the panelists were really being thoughtful of the property owner operator needs, right? And bringing them along, because they're still at the very early stages of understanding what's possible here.
Yeah.
So a couple of points that I thought were really interesting. We tend to focus a lot on the bringing OpEx down, right? Where are there cost efficiencies? Where can you smooth out operations? Where might there be energy savings?
Yep.
And Renee Loval, who's the Chief People Officer at Homebase, talked about how, that is really hard to quantify until after the investment's made, right? You can show case studies, you can show white paper, well, this is what we've achieved for others. But if you're able to actually also, with your IoT or prop tech solution, be able to show a new line of direct revenue, that's really powerful. So one of the things, for instance, that Homebase is doing is because they allow their approaches, allows the owner operator to own the Wi-Fi infrastructure themselves. That property owner can actually generate revenue immediately by upselling residents to a higher Wi-Fi package, or allowing them to do so even if it's just for the day because they're working remotely and they have to tape a podcast or do something where they really need rock solid connectivity, right? And so the investment in the technology comes with an additional line of revenue that they can see immediately, right? So I thought that was really interesting point. Another thing Jennifer Doctor from Johnson Controls mentioned was that, and this was, I think, off of her experience that you mentioned, moving into a new MDU of their own, that, property owners and operators are very good at selling spaces, and they're not good at selling technology within the spaces, right? Like that's not their job. It hasn't been their job. And so for those in prop tech and multifamily IoT to start there and understand that that's not been their job, right? Their job is to sell the space. And so how does technology kind of work into that? And so final point that kind of ties all that together was, I think it was Miriam from Brevo who mentioned actually that there's a ton of turnover in multifamily, right? So not only the residents who are turning over, quite a bit, but also the staff.
Yeah.
And so there's a constant need for training and for these support services to come alongside the property owner operator, because you don't want to make their job harder by bringing, prop tech to their building. It's meant to, assist them, generate new revenue, et cetera. But there's this really important line of support services, and that's where that dealer play is, right? That Brevo might put in the platform, but there needs to be this local network of dealers that are servicing in there and to support and to train. And so I think that was really powerful coming out of that panel for the dealers in the audience.
Yeah, I might add too, we heard from Colin with Silicon Labs and also Preston with Salto. He was Salto Systems, both very enthusiastic about the opportunity, but a lot of the dealers are hesitant to get into multifamily because it is such a large investment. There are a lot of issues right now with labor, getting labor, as well as cost. And even if you think of gas, being able to price out things with the rising inflation. So I think that these major players in the background are going to have to invest really, really heavily, right, into the dealer network, because they have such small margins to begin with, that asking them to ramp up so that they could handle, the multifamily space is going to be a lot there. So there's going to have to be a lot of nurturing and love for the small dealers out there to get them to really warm up to the space and not fear the risk, which of course there's always risks with big rewards as well.
That's right. So I see we're coming up on time here, and I want to give you guys a chance to kind of plug things that you're interested in and working on. Also, if there's anybody that you talk to around the ESX halls and the tables and things like that, to go ahead and mention them. Jen, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I guess my final closing thought is that I love these shows because of the new thoughts that it gives me for our research. So every year we survey security dealers. This is something that we've been doing for a long time. And so we have some really fantastic trending data, and that boots on the ground view, that forefront, right, into homes, into businesses, of what the security dealers are seeing, where competition is coming from, what the demand is really, really interesting. And so I came away with some new ideas of what I want to ask this time around. And that, so the 2021 data is available today. And then we'll be going to field again at the end of the summer, early fall. Usually it's like a September, early October that we go back to field. So certainly an open call to anybody who is interested in that research to see the results that we already have, but also to participate in crafting the next set of questions to go deeper. And the landscape's always changing, so we want to make sure that we're keeping up with it.
Wonderful. What about you, Elizabeth?
Yeah, the ESX show is really a great experience. I think the home security industry is very strong. There is a lot of competition coming between the blurred lines with smart home device companies and their offerings, as well as home security systems. But ultimately, the pie is everything is expanding as a result of DIY and the ease of installing these products. And I think we're at a great inflection point in the industry. So I really appreciate the leadership of ESA. So Merlin, who is in charge of the association, and George DeMarco, they've brought together some really great industry leaders. I saw John Loud and John Campo, who are some of the best in the security business. It really is a tight-knit community of second and third generation family small business owners, and one of the reasons why I love the industry so much, since that's where Parks Associates also sits. So thank you for inviting us to share a little bit about what we learned. And as far as the research goes, I know our team, you, Chris, and Jennifer, are working very hard at publishing reports almost on a daily basis. And so it's always a great pleasure to read the work that you all are producing. So thank you for continuing to bring the best research to the industry.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us. Could you please tell your Twitter handles or any other social media where our listeners can reach you?
Sure, I'll start. I'm at Jennifer M. Kent on Twitter, and then LinkedIn, easiest to find me through Parks Associates, and then Jennifer Kent. There's lots of Jennifer Kents out there, lots of Jennifers born in the 80s, and so Kent's pretty common too. So start with Parks Associates, and then you'll find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I am at Eliz Parks on Twitter and Elizabeth Parks on LinkedIn. Hopefully you can find me easily. So thanks again.
Amazing. Thank you. Connected consumers, make sure to also check out our LinkedIn newsletters. Elizabeth has a wonderful one also named after our podcast, so make sure to check that out. I'll also put in the show notes all of our research and upcoming events. So thank you guys so much for joining us today, and make sure to check out our upcoming episodes.
Rosey, don't forget to plug us too. So follow me, See White Insights on Twitter. Also, everyone should sign up for the Parks Points newsletter. In addition to Elizabeth's LinkedIn, which has a ton of Parks Associates content, Parks Points is also a cool way to get some free research, a little sampling of what we do. And Rosey, plug yourself too.
Yeah, our listeners know our Twitter handles, but if you want to follow Chris or I, my Twitter handle is at Rosey Sera. So check us out.
All right, thanks everyone.